welcome to Dear Katie, the podcast that amplifies courageous voices and real stories of resilience, healing, and hope after trauma. Inspired by the many letters Katie has received over the last 20 years, each week she interviews survivors, healers, and experts to honor their stories and explore the many paths to healing and hope. Before we begin, please know, many episodes of Dear Katie cover sensitive topics related to sexual violence, trauma, and recovery. Listen with care and take the space you need to take care of yourself. Your well-being is what matters most. Now, let's join Katie and today's guest for a conversation that matters.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Dear Katie podcast. I am Katie Kestner, your host, and I am so delighted to have all of you listening, continuing to journey, journal with us, take notes, find anything you can from each and every one of our guests to inspire you, empower you, and help you grow, thrive, survive. You are going to adore Priscilla. I know it. So I'm going to just share a few words to introduce Priscilla Bordayo. She is a local and national sexual abuse advocate. She has been sought out as a motivational speaker by numerous community organizations, such as local law enforcement, the National Guard, prisons across the United States, both public and private schools, all discussing her story of overcoming incest and bringing awareness through education in order to end abuse. She's been invited to speak before the Senate and House of Representatives. She was part of the Clean Slate Bill. Hopefully we can hear more about that. Her first bill that was signed by Governor Whitmer. Priscilla has been featured on TCT, Moms of Miracles, Driven by Women, many shows. She was the 2019 Woman of the Year, 2020's 10 Over the Next 10 award winner. Oh my goodness, so many accolades. And the 2022 Governor's Award recipient. She also won the 2023 Neighborhood Impact Award. And so far, I know she's very active with community action, change, sexual abuse awareness, and has her own powerful story to share with us. Priscilla, welcome to the show.
Oh man, thank you so much for having me. I feel like every time I listen to that, I just am like so blown away with how far I've come, but also like I hope that it just gives so much hope and encouragement to other victims that they too can truly live their best life after a horrible situation.
100%. So just so everyone gets to know you better, where did you grow up? Yeah. And let's start with early childhood. Like what happened at that point?
Okay, so I was born in Abilene, Texas. And then when I was like 2 or 3 years old, my family moved from Abilene, Texas to Lansing, Michigan. I lived in Lansing, Michigan all the way up until right after 5th grade. And then I went to Texas for my 6th grade year, which is where my dad became a pastor. It's where I became a victim. And we were only there for a little bit over a year. Then we moved back to Lansing, Michigan. And then I was here all through junior high and high school. And then after high school, I went back to Texas to a town called Waxahachie, Texas, and I went to college there, got my degree in education. Then it came back to Michigan, and I haven't turned back since. Michigan truly is my home, but I have a special place for Texas in my heart.
Okay, well, that's a lot. I feel like a ping pong ball. I just watched you go from up and down the center of the country.
Yes.
So you have the mom and dad. Dad was a minister for a bit. Do you have any siblings as well?
Mm-hmm. I do. I have an older brother. I have an identical twin sister, and I have a younger sister.
Okay.
And I have 11 nieces and nephews who are all absolutely amazing in their own right, very different, very creative, very gifted. So I'm living my best aunt life, and I have 0 kids.
Okay. The aunties are always welcome.
Yes.
So you took a blip. So it sounds like the part that we should start with is when your dad was the minister or pastor in Texas. And that was when you were like in 6th grade or?
Yeah, I probably will go a little further back because I think it's really important to like kind of understand like my family history. So like I was born in Texas, but when we moved to Lansing, Michigan, my dad has 14 brothers and sisters. A majority of his family lived in Lansing, Michigan. My mom's side of the family, who she has 8 brothers and sisters, they all lived in the Texas area. So I come from very large families on both sides. When I was 5 years old, though, all of our houses, so think about my father having 14 siblings, all of our houses were raided by the FBI all at the same time. My uncles and my grandfather were involved in selling drugs across the country. And because of their involvement with the selling of drugs, all my uncles and grandfather went to prison. My father was the only male not involved with that. And he had a younger brother, so he was not involved with that. But the rest were very much involved. And that sort of kind of started like the realization that like my family was already like just like revealing to me that we're making really bad decisions, and it wasn't really fun growing up with my last name, and people kind of looked at you a little differently, and you kind of started seeing like family fights and family like dysfunction, and you started to question a lot of things like, is this normal? Do all families experience this? Spent a lot of time going with my father to the prisons and visiting my uncles. And so like that was sort of my childhood until we got in like to 12 when I was 12 years old and in sixth grade. I think it's important to also understand like my parents were very involved parents. My mom and dad were the first Christian family. My um, dad's side came from a very strong Catholic family. And so my dad was sort of the one that kind of branched out into more of like the charismatic Assembly of God. We're non-denominational now, but still very involved with like the Assembly of God, like community and churches. But you know, my dad was a very involved dad. My dad served in the army. He was a very hands-on dad who's very strict. So don't get me wrong, very strict guy, but also like very charismatic, very fun, came to all of our sports, like, you know, helped us with our homework. My mom was always very quiet, could be very submissive, with such like people would describe her as a prayer warrior because she truly is. So growing up, there was a lot of like mixed things as far as like you would see all these good things, but then there would be these family fights, and like there was already sort of like this double life, and you're starting to see it as a young age, at a very young age. Like on one end, you see certain things, and on the other end, it's not quite matching up, if that makes
It
sense.
totally makes sense. And I think it's really hard, Priscilla, for people to grasp. I like what you said about like this out. You just painted like two layers is the way I pictured it. We had this outside layer of your uncles and prison and drugs, and you're seeing that. Then we have this like next layer where you have your dad, it sounds like trying to rebuff and change and move away.
Yeah,
And then the most interior space back inside the home sounds
yeah,
chaotic and bad. It's like a molten lava cake. Like all of a sudden, it's like a
absolutely.
mess in there.
Yeah, it looks good on the outside, right?
Yeah, it's
Very
like very
tasty.
tasty,
Yes.
but oh my gosh, it's oozy and like muck in the middle.
Yeah,
I'm
absolutely.
so sorry. But I guess when you're a child growing up in that, I think I'm guessing you must have developed a lot of resiliency and ways to navigate that trauma.
hmm
I'm curious now as an adult looking back, of the little you, can you remember some of the things you were doing at that young age to like get through it?
Yeah, it's weird because when I think about my childhood, like I feel like one of the things that sort of was the result of trauma is like just like there's certain aspects that I don't remember, and then there's
Mhm.
things that, you know, that are so clear. And it's crazy how like your memory can change on you like at any point. Like all of a sudden what you didn't remember, you can remember. Like,
Let's talk about that for just a second. I have a
yeah.
theory, and you just made me think of it. My new theory I just came up
Oh,
with,
yeah.
like, so we can talk. You know what I'm thinking is the same thing for me. Like a lot of us have multiple layers of trauma that we only
For
reveal to
sure.
certain people. But I was thinking maybe the way our brain works, maybe they'll figure this out. But I'm thinking, Priscilla, you tell me if you like this idea where I'm headed. Some of the things I remember so vividly, like you are saying,
hmm
they involve, like, I can smell it, see it, maybe hear it. Like it's a little more unique in some regard. And so that extra layer of brain synapses makes it stick more. And some of the other stuff that was almost like more routine terribleness, it just doesn't show up as fast and clear as some of the
Yeah.
ones with a few extra details that maybe my brain like grabbed. Does that make any sense?
No, there's like so much truth to that. I think too, sometimes the way I like try to describe it and maybe just want to choose to believe that there's parts of this I feel like God has protected
Oh,
me from. There's things that like I don't want or need to
okay, God
remember,
runs the brain
even
though.
though
I think God made the
maybe it's
brain.
very true. It's true. But I also think there's parts where it's like, there's such layers, like you were saying, even to our
Yeah.
healing. And I think it's kind of like when you're ready to sort of peel back that, you can go in and like actually spend more time on that specific thing on healing, because healing is like not necessarily an overnight, even though I do believe that healing does exist, can exist, and there's things that you don't necessarily have to work on anymore because you've dealt with that, it's done with. And then there's other things that it's just not that black and white, right? There's just a lot of gray area. And I think trauma and dysfunction sometimes can be that way. So I think there are parts of my memory that's like, thank you, God, for not allowing me to remember, or like even like with this specific victimization with my father, there are parts that I can remember, and a lot of it is all the stuff that was leading up to the actual moment and the actual act. When you get to the act, it's almost like remembering where my brain went, and it was like frozen, like fear, like thinking I'm screaming and begging for someone to rescue me, but yet nothing's coming out because no one is coming. So I think there's like it's like a weird thing of like how your memory works, but but again, like I remember going to like the prisons and like seeing my uncles and my grandpa, and going with my father, to see my grandpa when he finally got out. And my dad led my grandpa to the Lord, and I would describe my grandfather as like a very mean, drunk old man prior to seeing him accepting faith in his life and accepting Jesus. And I've only seen this a few times in my life where someone like actually forgave and let go and accepted like something new into their life, and actually see their entire countenance, their complexion, like everything about them completely changes right in front of you. And it's like the most beautiful thing. But although I have an incredible, beautiful outcome, which we will definitely talk about, kind of like how I went from, being a victim of incest, and, how I'm able to sort of have this relationship with my mother and father. It's a unique situation. And what I can say about this is that I love talking about the topic of forgiveness, because that truly is my story when it comes to like my relationship with my father and with my mother, like my natural parents. Part of this is because a lot of people.
Let's,
Go ahead.
let's
Go
go
ahead.
back,
Yeah.
because I feel like
Okay.
let's
Yeah.
get forgiveness in a bit, but go back, like just
Okay.
so we know context of what exactly you went through.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. So when I was in sixth grade, my dad became a pastor. So we moved from Lansing, Michigan. We go to Texas. And our life was fairly normal up to that point, outside of, like I said, sharing, like just seeing like the dysfunction as far as going in and out of the prisons. My dad became a pastor, and all of a sudden, and truly, like it was like my father became someone that I didn't know, but also so did my mom. My mom was always a little more on the reserved and very conservative, but also very, all of a sudden, it was almost like, you ever just know when someone doesn't, like they're being controlled, or like they don't have a voice. Like I started to see signs in my mom just change, and kind of not like her voice just wasn't what it was before. And like the things that started to change was our home was connected to our actual church. So like there wasn't a lot of separation between our home and the church. Like literally you could walk down the hallway, and if you go through a specific door, you're going to the church. If you go to another door, you're either going to the big like like lunch space area. It was like an all-purpose area where the congregation would go and have like events and lunches. If you go to the next door, it's our home. So like not a lot of separation. It was a lot of fun when we played hide and seek with all of our school and church friends. But outside of that, it was almost like there was no real escape from home, if that makes sense. And what ended up starting to happen was my dad would start coming to my room. And let me just explain a little bit about my room. I told you I have an identical twin sister. I'm only 1 minute older, but I live up to the older sister. Like I am like, it's 1 minute, but I'm older, so I should get my own room. I begged for my own room. And the room that I got was so tiny. It was such a small room that you could only fit one twin bed. And it was my twin bed and then 2 bars and like layers of clothes, because I've always been a clothes girl. And I was like, I'll take the tiny room and I'll have the clothes being my entire like wall. And what ended up happening was my dad started to come into my room and he started to touch me inappropriately. The touching turned into obviously like a lot more. And what ended up happening was I told my twin sister. She was the first person I'd ever told that our father was coming into our room, and things were starting to get to a point where like I didn't know what to do. I was scared. And if you can imagine, like that's really hard for a 12-year-old to hear. She's like, no way, like dad would never do that. And I'm like, I'm telling you, he's like coming into my room. Like I need help. Like I don't know what to do. I was telling her that I was scared he was going to come into my room that night. And I didn't know a lot about sex. I didn't know a lot about intimacy or anything like that. I'm 12 years old. My parents hadn't had those talks with me. So I didn't know like what was next. But what I had felt was in my heart and in my gut, I felt like this is going to get worse. So it wasn't that night, but the next night. So that night, my father came into my room like he normally did. But the next night, my twin sister hid in my room in between where my clothes were. If you could just imagine, this is like a bar and it's all hanging clothes. So if you could just think she's sitting here and she's peeking between the clothes and she sees everything my father did to me. Mm-hmm. And the way that my mom found out was because my sister saw. When my mom found out, then I thought she was such a coward and I hated my mom because I found out my mom had known about it, but my mom didn't know what to do. She was like, we don't have family here. We don't have friends here. We just moved here. We're in a small little town called Vernon, Texas. My dad's a pastor. They put him in the newspaper. Everyone knew who we were. There was no escaping, like, yet again, that identity of our name. Only this time our name was like attached to something good. He's a pastor. They brought him all the way from Lansing, Michigan to like do great things in the community. And my mom ended up trying to get me like this counselor to like come to the church and like speak to me because that was like the only thing she could do. We kept going as normal. My dad would still get up every Sunday morning. He would preach. I am a worship leader and a worship director now. I have always been a singer. I was still expected to get up on Sunday mornings and still lead worship. And it was probably the most confusing, most hurtful, frustrating seasons of my life, trying to navigate being sexually abused by my father, by a pastor, by someone who was promoting and preaching Jesus only behind closed doors. Things were not matching what was being said on that platform. And it was a very, very difficult time. And there was a time when my mom, one of the things that our family, it was kind of like a perk of being like a pastor's family and pastor's kids, was every Sunday after church, our family got to go to Golden Corral, which is like the buffet, and they would pay for our family to eat every Sunday after church. And at first, you know, we're kids. We're like, we think that's cool. We can eat whatever we want, however we want, as much as we want after church. And it was kind of like one of those things where like, I had started even then where it's like, I started trying to eat a lot of food because in my brain, I really just like didn't want to be pretty. I was like, if I'm not pretty, no one will want me in that way. And I started to like, that's when I really felt like things started like switching for me when it comes to food. And one Sunday after church, we went to eat, we got back to the house and to the church. And my mom says, everyone is going to get out of the car except for my family nickname was Lala, except for Lala. So my dad took me to this park and we sat at this little picnic table, and he wanted to apologize to me for what he was doing to me. Only I wasn't ready for that apology. I was so scared. I didn't know what to say, and I ended up running, like physically running all the way back home. And when I opened the door, my mom was sitting there crying. And with all the energy that I had left after running, I went and I just slapped her across the face. I had allowed so much bitterness and anger to build up, and I was so angry with her. And I told her, like, how dare you? Like, don't you ever send me with him alone again. And it was the first time that I felt like I hated my mom more than I hated my father, because I didn't know it then. But at the time, I thought she had the power to change my situation, and she didn't. And it wasn't until later on, in which we'll probably get there a little later on, kind of how my mindset changed and how I kind of got to this place of understanding and getting to some like root causes, that I started to realize like the kind of person like I was becoming, and how I sort of changed my life around, and how my mindset and perception of how victimization and trauma and family dysfunction, like how I actually see it, and how what it really is, and actually seeing it for what it really is. But that was sort of the journey. And it wasn't until like a few months later where I just really started to act out, be very disrespectful. And I threatened that I was going to call like people that we knew back home. And my family finally decided to like just pack up before we went back to 7th grade. So like we left that summer of our 6th grade. We went 6th grade year, and then we literally left that next summer. That's how quick it was. So by 7th grade, we're back in Lansing, Michigan. And it was just because I was becoming very defiant, and basically told my mom, like, if she didn't do something to help me and change our situation, I just started to threaten her that I was going to tell people, and we ended up going quietly.
Yeah, but Priscilla, you've been talking for a while, and oh my gosh, I'm overwhelmed. But I'm also just reeling in you being 12 and standing up so strong. You're like a towering tree of strength at that moment, and you're so young. It's amazing that you put your foot down. And I know you said it's being defiant, but my gosh, that was a tremendous amount of courage. Maybe you're just built that way.
I think so, maybe.
Right? That's unheard of, that kind of strength, and like in knowing deep in your soul that this is just not okay. But one clarifying part, when you packed up and left back from Michigan, did it end? How long did it went on for a whole year? Was it every night? I'm just like, that's a small detail. I'm sure one night, 100 nights, it's all bad. But I just know, like, I'm curious, that tipping point when you stood up that caused that catalyst of movement, like it must have been huge. So was it every night? Like, it would just, what was that like?
So it wasn't every night, but it was definitely more than a handful of times over that span of the year. Mainly because I didn't have the courage at the time. Like, I didn't speak up sooner to my sister. I would say, like, if that at the time, like, because you don't realize it's courage, right? Like, you don't realize it as a 12 years old. You don't realize like what that actually is, or you don't realize how strong you are, like, what's actually on the inside of you until you're actually in it, But at the time,
I'm curious also, were there any patterns? Were you like, okay, it's Sunday nights, or it was after dad did blank, or he was drinking, or what? Did you notice any consistency at all?
So no consistency. And honestly, I wish there would have been a reason of like, or an excuse to be like, like, it's because he was drinking, or if he starts drinking, things are going to happen. I think it would have helped me, right? It would have given me some indication on something, but unfortunately, like, that was not the case. It was just a matter of like not knowing. And I think that's why the fear went so far deep down in me, was like, I didn't know when he was going to come into my room. So I think, I even look back and I'm like, why didn't I just go sleep in my sister's room? Like, there's things that you wish you would have done differently, or why didn't I have the, why didn't I tell my mom? Like, I think fear can be so crippling sometimes that you don't know why you don't do certain things or why you do certain things. All I know is that I didn't keep track of how many times. I know it was more than a handful of times when my father came into my room. I know that the moment I told my sister, that next day she was in my room. And that was the last time he came into my room.
Mm-hmm.
But I can tell you it was like that part of the trauma ended and something else started as far as like what happened in the process. But we quietly moved from Texas. Like we didn't share anything regarding that situation. We moved back to Lansing, Michigan, and we actually moved in with an uncle who had just got released from prison. So we're in his basement. And what I can share is that I had another sibling who then got abused by my father. And I say another sibling mainly because that's her story and it's her story to tell.
Mm-hmm.
And I never want to speak for her.
Mm-hmm.
But what I can say about that situation is that one morning we were getting ready to go to school, and I had left my gym bag. So I played 3 sports all year round. I played basketball, volleyball, and softball. I did anything and everything to stay out of the home. Anything that kept me busy, like that was me.
Mm-hmm.
I was very determined to get out of my family and to get out of what I had known even at a very young
Mm-hmm.
age. And I had forgot my gym bag. So I was like, oh no, like, wait, I got to go get my bag. So I went to the basement, I grabbed my bag, and my sister, when I was getting ready to come back up the stairs, I'll never forget it, or her voice. And she said, my name, my nickname, Lala. And it was the way she said it and looked at me. I knew that what was done to me was now being done to her.
Mm-hmm.
So a whole nother level of anger and bitterness and fear came upon me, but also a lot of guilt and shame. Same thing for the sister that saw that what took place with me and who did tell my mom. I think there was a lot of guilt and shame from not believing me, but also like had she come that night instead of the next night, she would have, rescued me a day earlier and not had to experience that last night. And that's all things that we've had to sort of maneuver and navigate. But I got to the point where I told my mom, like, you have to do something or like I will kind of thing. It was just one of these things where you've got to change it. So we did go through CPS and the court process with one of my other sisters. And unfortunately, what ultimately happened was, because of everything that happened with my dad's side of the family being in prison and just being in the spotlight with that last name and being in the same city, my dad being the breadwinner, my mom not having a job, her fear was we were not going to be able to pay our bills. We weren't going to be able to have our home. We weren't going to be able to continue living. She ultimately asked my sister and I to lie to the courts to protect our family. This was to protect our family. And it was a very tough decision because the sister that was not abused asked me, like, are you going to lie to the courts? We're headed up to the judge's office and we're going up to the courtroom. And ultimately, long story short, I did lie to the courts to protect my family. We ended up going right back into a trailer home. We ordered pizza that night and we navigated life like nothing happened. We threw it under the rug and continued moving forward with our life. And so I'm sure you have a lot of questions, so I don't want to go too
Oh my
far.
gosh, Priscilla.
Lots of stuff happened.
I'm just thinking, yes. But one thing I will say, it's I wish more we could get this conversation out around the globe. On Friday this past week, I ran an international justice symposium, and the point being, what you just navigated is our silence buys us food on the table and freedom from prison and more hardship. And so women continue to have the burden of sexual abuse because we have to choose silence over possibly being homeless or without any other means. And this is like, think about this. This is the United States of America, and it's not another country. It is our country, and it goes on. And what year would you say this was? I don't want to, I mean, we all are ageless. We're all gorgeous and
Yeah.
amazing, but
Oh
would this
gosh,
be,
I hate math.
no, is this the 90s? Was this?
Definitely the 90s,
I was thinking,
because I was born in 85.
right. So like late 90s or
Yeah,
90s.
yeah.
Right. And just for context, so Priscilla's doing this for our
Hmm.
listeners. Priscilla's living this at that. I might have been speaking in like Idaho, North Dakota, right about the time I just been on the
Yeah,
cover of Time magazine. I was 18 then. And so
yeah,
I'm like traveling around, and I don't get to meet Priscilla then. Um, but
yeah,
there's thousands and thousands of Priscillas suffering and going through this. And so I
yeah,
guess, I feel like we only have so much time, and it's so very
for sure.
important for our listeners to learn a little. I have two questions about like until you now and as an adult, like two things, like
Hmm.
you're still suffering in silence. What was one thing that you positively gained from that strength and courage in silence? Like when we suffer and we take on more burdens, we become strong because we can carry it all. So, what
Yeah,
would you say is something that you subsequently were able to do because you had gone through all of that before you were even 20? Think of
yeah.
something.
It's interesting, yeah, because I think I started to realize actually how much control I actually had
Mm-hmm.
when it was weird because it's like there were things that I could say and do and be like to my mom, like, you've got to do something. And, it motivated her, okay, like, we're going to call CPS. But it was also like me sort of questioning at one point, like, really, who is in control, right? Because all she had to do was ask us to lie, and I was able to do that, right? Like, I think it was more of like what I found was right after that took place, I started to realize that not only do I have more control than I realized, but I have an inner strength that was always on the inside of me from even a little child. Like
Perfect.
just being able to navigate, like, hey, like, you have more strength than you realize.
Yeah, and more wherewithal and more
Yeah,
ability, more fortitude, and
yeah,
more ability to cut through. Like I'm gonna say, like, where's the line of tolerance? It's Priscilla, that's totally what I had to do the same. And I think sometimes
yeah,
we were
yeah.
really young, and I was older than you, 18, but you have to
Hmm.
say, what is my life worth? Where do I stand? Would I rather worry? Would I know the value of my body and my soul.
Yeah,
And no
yeah,
one
for
should
sure.
have any say over it. And if we run free into the wind and say, that is the sacred, that is the important
Yeah,
thing, and there's nothing else, I would live on the dirt to have freedom for my soul and my body. I mean, I,
yeah,
I am and was fierce like that. That's just how I thought,
yeah,
and maybe that's the same as
yeah,
you. Like you were so in that vein. And that's
yeah. I would say the inner strength thing, but I also like I think there was a drive that came to me
Mhm.
that made me want to get to the why. Mainly because, like, if you really think about it, not everyone gets that why. No one, not a lot of people get that answer. And I fortunately was able to get to the why, like the why and the how. Like, how did we get here? How did my father, who was a charismatic preacher, full of the word, who served in the army, he was involved in the community, who loved his kids, was hands on, like, very strict father, but like, how did it become so dysfunctional and so chaotic and so messy? How did we get here? And I think once I became an adult and I think what helped me was I quickly realized from 5 years old, I realized I knew what I didn't want.
Mm.
I knew that I didn't want to live the way some of my family members were living. I knew that I didn't want to go to prison. I knew that I wanted my freedom, and I knew that I wanted to live out a life that was good, fun, and I wanted to find what my actual worth was. And I was able to do that throughout my faith. I know who I am in Christ. I know what I have to offer this world. But really, what did it for me was I started to dig into like my family story and my family history. Like, how did we get here? And that's the thing. When we're dealing with like victimization and trying to end victimization, you're talking about, rehabilitation, reconciliation, restoration, all these things that victims and truly want for themselves. You have to get to the root causes of like where did this start? How did we get here? And you have to have those difficult conversations. It's not fun. It's not comfortable. But when you start asking these questions and you can actually get answers, you can start solving things. And that's kind of what started happening with me was I went and I was talking to a lot of my family, especially my father, like just I knew that I wanted to forgive him because it was the bitterness and the anger that was taking over my life. I knew I needed to release that. A lot of people think forgiveness means it's excusing other people or letting them off the hook, when no, it's really forgiveness is for you. It's to heal you. It's to set yourself free because you want to say, hey, what you did to me no longer is going to affect me. You're actually taking your control back versus being bitter and angry, and then you're keeping yourself from living your best life and experiencing joy. And it was finding out that my grandfather had abused 13 of the 14 kids. That does not excuse what my father did, but it gave me an understanding of how we got here. You see a lot of repeated cycles. And I talk about this a lot, even when it's not to the degree of what we've experienced. Sometimes it's even things like if you grow up with parents who are just yellers in your home, there's a tendency that you or your sibling might be a yeller. You learn these things as a kid and you take on these things. And then as an adult, you have to unlearn them. And there's a lot of healing and undoing that you're trying to change because you realize, oh man, I sound more like my parent than I want to. You start saying, I'll never be like this. I'll never do this. And sometimes you see repeated cycles. And I just knew that I wanted that stuff to end with me. I was like, I don't want abuse to be attached to me. I don't want to abuse myself, or even because when I wasn't healed, I was not making the best choices. I used to always say that hurt people, but healed people heal people. And although I know that, some people might argue and say, well, not all people hurt people. Maybe you don't hurt people the same way that they hurt you. But in some ways, when we're not healed and we don't deal with our hurt on the inside of us, we do cause hurt to other people. There's friendships that I could have handled better. There's relationships that I could have handled better. There's decisions that I should have never made. I found my worth in just going and having sex with complete strangers because at the time, I didn't know what my worth was. I didn't know who I was. All I wanted to do at that time of my life in college was to numb the pain. I didn't want to have to face what I had actually experienced and actually heal because it's hard to heal. It takes a lot of hard work. And after going through all the hard work to heal, I have finally realized that on both sides of it, it's hard. So I often tell people you have to choose your hard. And do you want to choose the hard that's going to lead you to being set free? And that's what I did. And I'm very, very committed to helping victims and survivors who've experienced abuse or specifically sexual assault. But now with the work that I do, I get to help victims of all crime be able to heal and elevate their voices, which is amazing. Be able to find their voice back and be able to truly be their best version of themselves because that worst moment does not have to be there forever.
Priscilla, you're like amazing at all the words. So, public speaker, here we come. I think I'd like
Oh my gosh.
no, it's all good. I think I'd like to kind of head in the final direction. Talk about the organization and the work you're doing currently. Your accolades, we can read about all the cool things, but I think your personal passion.
They're not important.
No, everything's important.
Yeah. It is, but honestly, I'm way more passionate about talking about Crime Survivors Speak because listen.
Yeah, let's talk about that.
Let's talk about that because the words are great, but so one of the things I think is important to really emphasize is, after I shared my story on social media on Easter Sunday morning, because I did it specifically at Easter, it's my favorite holiday because of the power of the cross, the power of forgiveness. And that was the decision I was able to make between my father and I, and my mother and I. And right after that, I started getting into court advocacy, medical advocacy. I did community advocacy. And the one thing that I always wanted to do was I wanted to work in legislation. And so I had ended up being introduced to our vice president of Crime Survivors Speak. And he was sharing his story with me. He's a gun violence survivor, and he had a very similar story as far as the decision that he made to also forgive the person that caused harm to him, because he too had repeated a cycle. The person that shot him had been shot, and you started to see a lot of these cycles. And I was like, I had never heard of another story where they wanted forgiveness for that person. Not that we're saying we don't want accountability and that there isn't consequences for your actions, but we knew that we wanted to bring healing to our communities, and we wanted to see rehabilitation because we wanted healing and safety for all. And while talking to him, he said, Priscilla, what's one thing that you would want to do that you're not doing right now? Is there one thing? And I said, yeah. I was like, honestly, like I've always wanted to work in legislation. And he smiled from ear to ear, and he's like, well, that's what our organization does. And I ended up coming on to their staff, and I'm so thankful for the opportunity. We have over 300,000 victims and survivors that are part of our organization across the country. And we've been able to move policy all across the country. And the one I really wanted to hone in was victim compensation. We have helped pass victim compensation bills in 12 states. And we've expanded access to 500,000 survivors of crime. And why this is so meaningful for me, I know it's something to celebrate so much, because I didn't even know victim compensation existed. My mom thought she couldn't do it because she didn't have the funding. She wasn't the breadwinner. Had we known victim compensation was even a thing, it was available for us, I feel like my mom would have made a different choice. And it's such an honor to be able to walk other victims and survivors through their application and say, hey, like, this victim compensation can pay for medical bills, lost wages, burial costs, mental health, like counseling, things that, they can use this funding to actually help with their healing process. And specifically in the state of Michigan, I am so proud of my team and I, because a lot of the times, victim compensation, there's a lot of barriers. And one of the biggest barriers that Michigan was facing was there was a time frame to be able to report and file for victim compensation. So in the state of Michigan, you only had 48 hours to file a police report. And if you could just think about victims of sexual assault, they don't come forward right away. If you're a gun violence survivor and you're healing in the hospital, you've already missed your window of opportunity to file. So we were able to move that 48 hours to 1 year. Wow. 1 year to file a police report and 5 years to file for victim compensation. And then we were able to expand the amount of money that someone could get if they were to lose their life as a result of crime. That went from $5,000 to $10,000. And the reason why we advocated for that was because if you think about just where we're at in our time and where money is, $5,000 would not cover a funeral cost. And that still leaves a family with, a barrier to try to figure out, where do I get this funding? It devastates me when I see family after family and they have lost their life due to crime, and they go create a GoFundMe page because they don't realize that victim compensation exists. And so we're working hard to change victim compensation across the country.
That's fantastic, Priscilla. Your work is so important and so successful so far, and you're only going to do more and more. I guess my closing request is, I feel like there's a lot of internal fortitude, but if some of the survivors listening to your voice and story don't feel like I'm never going to be Priscilla, I'm not that strong. What's a moment you could describe where you were like, not the superhero? Because I feel like now you're like Wonder Woman, Superman, all of it. But if you were like back to the human, like kryptonite
yeah,
stage, what would be one example of like how could you recommend a survivor just to get through a small moment of self-doubt or
yeah.
self-blame?
I think what I would say is that you're not alone, and to let them know that you truly believe them and you're there for them and you've been there. And even though when you can tell people you've been there, I think the best thing that you can do with a victim and survivor is truly listen to them. And if I had a survivor like that was sharing their story with me, I hear it almost every day, like survivors telling me like the things that they're experiencing or they've overcome or they finally left or, a DV situation. I think that I would just encourage them that you are stronger than you realize. And at any point, like there are resources out there for you to be able to utilize. I think that it's important to understand that we are building trauma recovery centers across the country too. We've established 2 in the state of Michigan, 1 in Grand Rapids, Michigan, and 1 in Detroit. And I would say, don't let your most hurtful moment like define you as a whole, but also like your voice is powerful. Your testimony is powerful. I would say don't stay silent because that's what kept me as a victim. And I know that there are seasons for everything. For a long time, I was the victim. I only stayed in that role, in that position, and that what's the right word? Because I was a victim,
Mm-hmm.
but I didn't want to stay a forever victim
Mm-hmm.
because you can't be a victim and victorious at the same time. There is victory in certain things, but I knew that I wanted to get on the other side of victimization. And what I would tell a victim now is that you can get on the other side of this. I promise you. You're hearing from someone who's gone through so much hurt and pain, so much healing and counseling and mentoring, and people who've had to walk alongside me and have to remind me, hey, like you're not there anymore. You don't have to like do that anymore. You don't have to act that way anymore. You are healing, remember? Like I think that there are so many people that truly want to help victims and survivors that like there's someone out there that's going to come alongside you to help you heal and help you cheer you on. Like that's what I do for a living, even outside of the crime survivor work. I run a nonprofit because I want to help people heal from the inside out. And I don't know, it's really hard to say one thing because
No, it's okay. You're fine.
it's just like not so black and white,
No, that
like
was gorgeous, Priscilla. That was amazing.
yeah.
I think we can all just relish in your courage and strength and everything you gave in all you said was just so welcome and helpful and empowering. So I'm so grateful. And I know anyone who wants to get involved, especially with the legislation and the work that you're doing for the victims' compensation, they will be able to
Yeah.
find your organization and look you up and reach out. So we'll make sure that's in show notes. And
Yeah,
yeah, for
absolutely.
sure.
We'd love to have them join us for sure.
Yeah, one more signature on a petition, one more, voice of strength and say this is needed is always going to move the mountain that we need moved. So
Yeah, absolutely. There's so many different areas actually under our organization that they can get involved in. There's chapter events. There obviously, yes, there's legislative work. There's trauma recovery centers. There is sign-on letters, but there's also like a lot of different things like the mental health healing spaces, where people can come and we have storytelling and, we have a lot of variety of things that victims and survivors can choose what they want to get involved in. But mostly, it's allowing them to elevate their voice. One of my favorite things about the organization is our policy retreats. It's bringing victims and survivors together. All of our bills are created by victims themselves. And it's a beautiful thing because we don't want legislators creating laws without including the voices that it truly impacts. And that's us survivors.
that's brilliant and beautiful. Thank you so much, Priscilla. And just as a reinforcement to everything Priscilla said, don't forget the Take Back the Night legal support hotline is not changing policy, but after the fact, if you're curious about whether I have a case, can I pursue any form of justice, that's our free national hotline. Call it or fill out the form and be instantly connected with someone who will listen and also let you know what the options are for where you are at the moment with your case. So together, we are totally thriving. So many amazing resources. And for our listeners, just continue to journey along. Take excellent good care of yourselves as we go. And until the next episode, be well, be strong, and together we thrive. And Priscilla, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for joining us on this episode of Dear Katie. These conversations are never easy, but they're always necessary. And we're so grateful you chose to share this space with us. If something in today's episode stirred something within you, please give yourself what you need. Whether that's rest, support, or just a deep breath, you're not alone. To hear more stories, resources, and survivor-centered conversations, be sure to subscribe and follow us on your favorite podcast platform. We want to hear from you, so please leave us a review and share your feedback. Your thoughts help us create episodes that resonate with listeners. Until next time, take care of yourselves and each other.